Welcome back to the Panic Room, everyone, and to a triple book review today. Yeah, I'm gonna try to talk about 3 books in one video. Grab a snack. Alright, so let's start with the one that is super well known, and that is Below by Laurel Hightower. Now, I said on Goodreads that I'm super ashamed about how long it took me to read this book. I am from West Virginia, and I am a huge fan of the Mothman, so there was really no reason why I shouldn't have read this by now, but thanks to my dear sweet friends Dave and Olive over at Book Blather, I now own it, and that was just so cool of them to send that to me, and I devoured it. Absolutely loved it. And beyond, kind of circling around my favorite cryptid, it had a really amazing message that I was not anticipating. And I think for anyone who has ever been in a relationship and had that relationship end, or a marriage and had that marriage end, I think you're going to see a little bit of yourself in this book, especially for my ladies, because, I know I've been there where you don't think you can do it on your own without someone. And sometimes that someone is a parent, sometimes that someone is a husband or a wife or what have you. When you have that feeling of incompleteness without another person, that's a scary thought. It really is, because it's almost like having to go out into the big scary world by yourself, like almost like a baby, being kicked out of the nest or what have you. And, there was a lot of that, a lot of dealing with that in this book. But there was also some absolutely amazing, paranormal-y kind of things, and I love when a book toes the line between, is it paranormal? Is it spooky? Or is it just your main character losing her shit? And I love that. I love that when you don't know. As the reader, you're not sure. And I kind of got some of that. When our character was really in the thick of the action, I was not completely 100% convinced that some of what was happening to her wasn't a combination of, the element that she was in, physically, and her mental state. Okay? And I love that. I love that ambiguous nature in writing. And, really, for those of you who are wondering, Mothman does not feature a lot in this book, but if you know anything about the history of Mothman, how some people look at him almost like a messenger, a warning, if you will, of, bad things to come. Some people call him a harbinger of doom. But, I've always personally, and I know some other people agree with me, look at him almost like, a messenger, hey, watch back, this is getting ready to happen. And I feel like that idea went into this, be careful, be careful, something is going to happen and you're going to need to make a decision or think fast or something. And that is really the type of Mothman, if you will, that I got in this story. And for my people who've really went into the Mothman story and know about the happenings that went on in Point Pleasant outside of the cryptid sightings, there's something for you in here too. But just know that is not really the focus of this. This is really about an internal journey of a woman, at least to me, and her finding herself again. And I have seen that the only critique of this book is the fact that it's so short, and I concur. This book could have been 3 times as long, and I probably would have devoured it just as fast. Now, does that mean that the story feels incomplete? Not at all. Not at all. It is done incredibly well. I loved every single second of it. I just personally wished it was longer because it was so damn good. So don't take that oh, the story is incomplete. No, it's just that good that you want to stay here. You want to stay in this girl's mind for a little bit longer and see what happens. So that is my little super late to the party review for Below. But in case you're like me and you haven't gotten around to it, here's your little push. Do it, because it is a damn fine book. So now for something completely different. So I actually first saw this book on Josh's channel, Coffee Cats and King. And, if you know Josh, yes, he does reviews, but I want to say that this was in one of his, compilation type videos where he talks about a number of books, and he doesn't go in depth in those type of videos. But when he mentioned the premise of this, I was hooked, because I love, mental kind of stuff. I love anything that has to do with like psychological or mental horror or things like that. To me, that's the scary shit, okay? You can do blood all day long, but when you get in here, the internal workings of the human mind are absolutely terrifying. So when he mentioned that this book was about like the idea that mankind has lost its ability to dream, I was just absolutely enthralled. And when I came across it when I was doing some birthday shopping and it was super cheap, I was like, I gotta pick this up. The Marrow Thieves by Cherie Dimaline, probably butchering that, but yeah, I was blown away in a lot of ways. Now, I want to say this book is considered young adult, and I want to pause here by saying I think it needs to be for, at the very least, older young adults. Now, that could be the fact that I've lived with a 12-year-old on occasion, and I wouldn't have her read this. I think it would be a little bit over her head, especially some of the themes that are alluded to. But for those of you who are familiar with YA books, this gave me some Divergent vibes. And it also gave me almost like some Homeward Bound kind of vibes. You guys remember that movie, Homeward Bound, with the two dogs and the cat? I just remember Chance and Sassy, and there was another one, like the leader, the golden retriever. Anyway, that idea of trekking through the woods and, searching for your home, your place, that was very prevalent in this book. And you had so much beautiful Native American culture weaved in. Not a lot, honestly, not a lot, even though your main characters are all Native Americans. But it was so well done. It was presented like this is their life. It wasn't like in your face, like, hey, they're doing this now. No, it was just, this is their world. This is their tradition. This is their culture. And I love that. I love that it was just, hey, here's a glimpse into their world. And the book is set in the future when, everything kind of goes down with the earth, like environmental wise, right. Like oceans creeping in and, temperature changes and all of this. However, again, it's not harped on. It's just like, hey, this is the world that is currently reality for our characters. And I like that. I like where it's not like shoved in your face, like, hey, here's what's happening. It's just, hey, here's the setting, here's your characters, here's their life, and then get on with the story. That's the best kind of book for me. I love that. So you're really watching a lot of this action through your main guy, he begins the story, I want to say at 11, but for the large majority of the book, he is around 16. And he goes by Frenchie, or Francis, I believe is his name, but everybody calls him Frenchie. And, you have this just absolutely beautiful way of looking at his world. He's on the run with this ragtag group of, his family, his pseudo family now, because he's lost his real family. But what I love about this book is that throughout the whole story, you get to see this world through these really innocent eyes of this 16-year-old boy who has had these absolutely terrible, horrible tragedies happen to him and his people as a whole. But he's also feeling all of these things that a normal 16-year-old boy would feel. You have this like kind of sort of little love thing going on with one of the girls, in his new family. And, so you have this like almost down-to-earth feel, like even though you have these terrible, horrible tragedies that as a reader, you try to tell yourself, hopefully will never happen, but then you're kind of grounded because then he's talked about how beautiful this girl is. It really does ground him in a lot of ways because there's so much about this book that is horrible. And it's not blood, guts, and gore horrible, it's that like soul-wrenching horrible. And I've pulled out a passage that I wanted to read you guys that when I read it, it just took me back. And I've mentioned in a past video or two about how one thing that I live for as a reader is when I come upon a sentence or a passage that takes my breath with its beauty. And sometimes it's not talking about the nicest stuff in the world, but the way the language comes together, the symbolism, the imagery, just absolutely takes your breath away. And this was one of those for me. We watched them carry off an old man and his grandson before we remembered to run. I'll never forget the way the man looked when they tossed his grandson in the back of the van like a bag of rice. I watched his soul fold up on itself like a closing door. The light and the warmth and the humanity clapped shut in his eyes because he couldn't protect the one thing that mattered. There was no coming back from that, even if he did manage to walk away later on, which he wouldn't. That part about the humanity clapping shut in his eyes, just, is that not powerful? Like, to me, that's powerful. Which, that alone, the imagery alone, because there's a lot of moments like that in this book, that is what elevates this, you know, out of the realm of Divergent or The Hunger Games or something like that. That is what elevated this for me. You know, yes, it does deal with some serious shit, but, you know, so does Divergent and Hunger Games in that regard. You know, if you've read the books, you know, they deal with a few kind of sort of mature topics, you know, for a teenager. This goes above and beyond that. There's a beauty to this pain. There's maturity to this pain that I didn't get out of those books. Now, I'm not dogging those. You guys know where I stand on this. If it gets a kid to read, I'm all for it. But there was a beauty here, a tragic beauty, a terrible beauty, but a beauty nonetheless, that I didn't see in those other books, that I haven't seen in other more common YA books. And not to mention, the story is pretty amazing too. Like, it's an amazing journey. You get to the end almost panting because you feel like you've been running with them. So, The Marrow Thieves. All right, and the last book. It is a compilation of short stories, or short fiction as it says, and I have never ever heard of this book. It was a fluke that I came upon it. If you guys watched my birthday book haul, you've seen it, and oh my gosh, was it awesome. So, I'm talking about Gateways to Abomination, and this is collected short fiction by Matthew M. Bartlett. This book was awesome. Now, it's not going to be for everyone. It is not, because it's kind of weird. And I'm going to equate it to something. And if you know what this other thing is, you're going to get a better feel for this book. If you've ever listened to the podcast, Welcome to Night Vale, this is Welcome to Night Vale if Welcome to Night Vale had a baby with, like, Stephen King, okay? That's this book. And I kind of got that vibe even when I read the little blurb about it, because it mentioned a radio station, except this radio, it takes it to the nth degree. It takes it to the nth degree. There is some body horror in here. Oh my gosh, it's just so good. And the way it's set up, like, you almost have like part mystery, there's some bizarre parts to it where you're like, what the hell just happened? There's this whole like creepy town aspect to it. It's really, really hard to explain. But if you've listened to Welcome to Night Vale, you kind of sort of have a little bit of the feel where you have a collective town. You have a bunch of people that you're talking about, but you get the story via like different happenings, like the news section or the weather or whatever. And to be a little bit clear on what I mean, you see how some of the titles, like this is Uncle Red Reads Today's News, and here's another one, The Gossip Hour, Sermon, and one of my personal favorite ones, News Brief, right? And that WXXT, that's the radio station. So there's this whole thing, this like overarching story that's happening in the town, but you get these like bits and pieces with these various townsfolk. All right, it's amazing. It's so good. And it's so out there. It's so weird. You know, not that you can't follow it. You can. But the setup is super unique. You know, you have, oh, there's some horror happening. Oh my gosh, is there some horror happening? But you know, some of it's like, and then some of it's like, what the shit was that? I cannot believe I haven't seen this before. I'm telling you, my horror people, especially if you like collections like I do, like if you're just a nut about like short fiction or short story collections, you're gonna love this. It's so good. It really is. I loved this. Loved it. It's wacky. It's real. I thought it was unique. Like even just the setup, like the whole idea with the radio station, you know, you got a lot of like mental shit happening. It's good. It's so good. So yeah, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it. So The Gateways to Abomination by Matthew M. Bartlett. So guys, that is it. Triple book review today. I hope you guys found one of these or maybe all of them, you know, a little bit intriguing. I know I did. I know they're all kind of different from each other and, you know, maybe they don't go together real well, but I enjoyed all of them. I felt they were all great. I felt they are all really, really worth it. You know, and they're thin, you know, they're not a huge commitment. So if you're looking for something like that, maybe one of these could fit the bill. But guys, thank you for hanging out for another review here in the Panic Room. Please like and subscribe. It would really help me out. And until next time, bye for now.